Oh my god. Oh god. Oh shit. Hi Spice. And Fall. Hello. I actually have everything set up. I actually have everything set up today. From the music to my model. So it's great. Also, thank you for the 2 months, Spice. Oh my gosh. Ooh, girl. All right. Whew. Oh man, feels like forever. Wait, hold on. This is, oh my god, I'm so happy for this. Hold on. Hold on. I'm glad I found these for this specific redeem. Hold on. I'm so happy for this. Hold on. Oh my god, I'm just so happy that I found that. I'm so happy. This finally gets a redeem. Oh my god. Yes, thank you. Oh my god. Okay. Okay, you ready? You ready? Look it! It's a little Isn't it cute? But this kind of defeats the purpose, so hold on. Okay, I guess I'm still trying to figure out like how oh my god, the fucking layers are just everywhere. It's a work in progress, if you haven't realized. Oh my god. Oh my god, girl. I'm still trying to figure out like to not like as you could tell, it's a work in progress. I'm just trying to figure out how like everything works. But yes. So that's for that redeem. Until I finally figure out what to do. How like I don't have everything like going all wonky and other bullshit like that. So yeah, I'm really happy that I found those. Those are the cutest thing. as I said, it's a work in progress. So, all right. So from the title, as you can see, finishing up the ring, and Miss Asakawa and Ryuji, the two characters that are currently like being talked about right now in the book, they figured out where Sadako was buried. And apparently 3 specific conditions have to be met in order to like have such a malevolent hold. So, very confined space, water, and something else. It was it's like something else. It's like I got 2 out of the 3. That's fine. And she was found. So they found the location of the well where Miss Sadako was. So Miss Girl is they found her bones, everything. And Asakawa currently has her skull in his hands. Yeah, so there's not much left of the book. It's like it's really thin. Like maybe like 2 pennies worth. Not even like maybe like half of a penny and a half. I don't know. Like I just want to say like a penny's worth left of reading. I think most of that is just like previews for other books. But I also have the second book, Spiral, which since there's not much, I'm gonna be getting into that after I finish reading. And it follows Ryuji, I believe. I don't know. I think that's what I think. I don't know. All right. Okay. So let's get this going. Okay. Is it too loud? I need to know. Because last time, nobody told me anything! And I was oblivious! But I'm probably just gonna do what I've always been doing. Do what I've always been doing. Hi, Calamity. Okay. I think it's a good volume, right? I think it's a good volume. Alrighty. Let's get to it. So they said they have Miss Sadako. Oh, God. As I said, they found Miss Sadako, Miss Girl herself inside the well. And they are currently so they currently have her remains, and they are trying to undo the curse because, well, they did undo the curse because Asakawa beat his deadline. They found her. So let's get to it. Oops. Part 4. Ripples. I still find it funny it happens in October and we're in October. October 19th, Friday. Let's see, how much longer do I actually have? Oh yeah, this ain't much. As I said. Alrighty. A phone call from the manager's office woke Asakawa from his slumber. The manager was reminding them that checkout was at 11 a.m. and asking if they'd prefer to stay another night. Asakawa reached out with his free hand and picked up his watch beside his pillow. His arms were tired, just lifting them was an effort. They didn't hurt yet, but they'd probably ache like hell tomorrow. He wasn't wearing his glasses, so he couldn't read the time until he brought the watch right up to his eyes. A few minutes past 11. Asakawa couldn't think of how to reply right away. He didn't even know where he was. Real. Will you be staying another night? Asked the manager, trying to suppress his annoyance. Ryuji groaned right beside him. This wasn't his own room, that was for sure. It was as if the whole world had been repainted without him knowing it. The thick line connecting past to present and present to future had been cut into two, before his sleep and after it. Hello? Now the manager was worried that there was nobody on the other end of the line. Hi, Silence.
Why is the rum always gone?
I just started, oddly enough, so you're good. Enjoy your lurk. Without even knowing why, Asakawa felt joy flood his breast. Ryuji rolled over and opened his eyes slightly. He was drooling. Asakawa's memories were hazy. All he found when he searched his recollections was darkness. He could more or less remember visiting Dr. Nagao and then heading for Villa Log Cabin, but everything after that was vague. Dark scenes came to him, one after another, and his breath caught in his throat. He felt like he did after waking up from a powerful dream, one that left a strong impression, even though he'd forgotten what it was about. But for some reason, his spirits were high. Hello? Can you hear me? Yeah. Asakawa finally managed to reply, adjusting his grip on the receiver. Checkout time is 11 o'clock. Got it. We'll get our things together and leave right away. Asakawa adopted an officious tone to match the manager's. He could hear a faint trickle of water from the kitchen. It seemed someone hadn't turned the faucet tight last night before going to sleep. Asakawa hung up the phone. Ryuji had closed his eyes again. Asakawa shook him. Hey, Ryuji, get up. He had no idea how long they'd slept. Ordinarily, Asakawa slept no more than 5 or 6 hours a night, but now he felt like he'd been asleep for much longer than that. It had been a long time since he'd been able to sleep soundly, untroubled. You had a week of possibly finding out how you couldn't possibly die. Yeah, I would have the longest fucking nap too. Hey, Ryuji. If you don't get out of here, they're going to charge us for another night. Asakawa shook Ryuji harder, but he didn't wake up. Asakawa raised his eyes and saw the milky white plastic bag on the dining table. Suddenly, as if some chance happening had brought back a fragment of a dream, he remembered what was inside it. Calling Sadako's name, pulling her out of the cold earth under the floor, stuffing her into a plastic bag. That's just fucked up. But she couldn't really, it's kind of fucked up. The sound of running water. It had been Ryuji last night who had gone to the sink and washed the mud from Sadako. The water was still running. By then, the appointed time had already passed. And even now, Asakawa was still alive. He was overjoyed. I would too! I would be too. Like, damn. Just at the pinnacle of possibly dying. And I'm not dying, yeah. Death had been breathing down his neck, and now that it had been cleared away, life seemed more concentrated. It began to glow. Sadako's skull was beautiful, like a marbled sculpture. Okay. Hey, Ryuji. Wake up. Suddenly, he got a bad feeling. Something caught in a corner of his mind. He put his ear to Ryuji's chest. He wanted to hear Ryuji's heart beating through his thick sweatshirt to know he was still alive. But just as his ear was about to reach Ryuji's chest, Asakawa suddenly found himself in a headlock. Held by two powerful hands. Asakawa panicked and started to struggle. I would kick his ass. Gotcha. Thought I was dead, didn't you? Buddy, I kind of wish you were dead. You specifically, Ryuji. Ryuji released his grip on Asakawa's head and laughed, an odd, childlike laugh. How could he joke around after what they'd just been through? Throw him out the window. Just throw him out the window. Anything was liable to happen. If at that instant he'd seen Sadako Yamamura alive and standing by the table, and Ryuji tearing at his hair dying, Asakawa would have believed his eyes. He suppressed his anger. He owed Ryuji a great deal. Yeah, he kinda does. But I still hate him. Stop fooling around. It's payback time. You scared the bejesus out of me last night. Still on his side, Ryuji began to chuckle. What did I do? You collapsed down there at the bottom of the well. I really thought you'd gone and died. I was worried. Time was up. I thought you were out of the game. Asakawa said nothing, just blinked several times. Huh, you probably don't even remember. Ungrateful bastard. When you're fucking close to dying, buddy. Now that he thought about it, Asakawa couldn't remember crawling out of the well on his own. Finally, he recalled dangling from the rope, his strength totally spent. Hauling his 60-kilogram frame 4 or 5 meters straight up couldn't have been easy. Even for someone of Ryuji's strength. The image of himself hanging suspended reminded him somehow of the stone statue of Enno Ozunu being pulled up from the bottom of the sea. Shizuko had gained mysterious powers for fishing out the statue, but all Ryuji had to show for his troubles were aches and pains. Ryuji? Asked Asakawa in a strangely altered voice. What? Thanks for everything you've done. I really owe you. Nah. Don't start getting mushy on me. If it hadn't been for you, I'd be, well, you know. Anyway, Thanks. Cut the crap, you're going to make me puke. Gratitude isn't worth a single yen. Well then, how about some lunch? I'm buying. Oh, well, in that case... Ryuji pulled himself to his feet, staggering a little. All of his muscles were stiff. Even Ryuji was having trouble making his body do what he wanted it to. From the South Hakone Pacific Land Rest House, Asakawa called his wife in Ashikaga and told her he'd pick her up in a rental car Sunday morning, as promised. So, everything's all taken care of? She asked. All Asakawa could say was, probably. From the fact that he was still here, alive, he could only guess that things were resolved. But as he hung up the phone, something still bothered him deeply. He couldn't quite get over it. Just from the mere fact that he was alive, he wanted to believe that everything was wrapped up neatly. But, thinking Ryuji might have the same doubts, Asakawa walked back to the table and asked, "This is really the end, right?" Ryuji had wolfed down his lunch while Asakawa was on the phone. "Your family doing all right?" Ryuji wasn't going to answer Asakawa's question right away. "Yeah. Hey, Ryuji, are you feeling like it's not all over yet?" "You worried? Aren't you?" "Maybe." "About what? What bothers you?" "What the old woman said. Next year you're going to have a child. That prediction of hers." The moment he realized Ryuji had exactly the same doubts, Asakawa turned to trying to dispel those doubts. Maybe the "you" just that once was referring to Shizuko instead of Sadako. Ryuji rejected this straight away. Not possible. The images on that video came from Sadako's own eyes and mind. The old woman was talking to her. "You" can only refer to Sadako. Maybe her prediction was false. Sadako's ability to foresee the future should have been infallible. 100%. But Sadako was physically incapable of bearing children. That's why it's so strange. Biologically, Sadako was a man, not a woman, so there was no way she could have had a kid. Plus, she was a virgin until right before she died. And her first sexual experience was Nagao, the last smallpox victim in Japan. Quite a coincidence. It was said that in a distant past, God and the devil, cells and viruses, male and female, even light and darkness had been identical, with no internal contradiction. Asakawa began to feel uneasy. Once the discussion moved into the realm of genetic structures, or the cosmos before the creation of the Earth, the answers were beyond the pale of individual questioning. All he could do at this point was to persuade himself to dispel niggling uncertainties in his heart and tell himself that it was all over. But I'm alive. The riddle of the erased charm is solved. This case is closed. Then Asakawa realized something. Hadn't the statue of Enno Ozunu willed itself to be pulled up from the bottom of the ocean? That will had worked on Shizuko, guiding her actions, and as a result she was given her new power. Suddenly, the pattern looked awfully familiar. Bringing Sadako's bones up from the bottom of the well, fishing Enno Ozunu's statue from the ocean floor. But what bothered him was the irony. The power Shizuko was given brought her only misery. But that was looking at things the wrong way. Maybe in Asakawa's case, simply being released from the curse was the equivalent of Shizuko's receding power. Asakawa decided to make himself think so. Ryuji glanced at Asakawa's face, reassuring himself that the man before him was indeed alive, then nodded twice. "I suppose you do have a point." Exhaling slowly, he sank back into his chair, and yet... What? Ryuji sat up straight and asked, as if to himself. What did Sadako give birth to? No, that's the $1,000,000 question. It's because, like, because he's not wrong. She technically couldn't have kids. Technically. So who knows at this point? Meow, meow, meow. Okay. Asakawa and Ryuji parted company at Atami Station. Asakawa intended to take Sadako's remains back to her relatives in Sashikiji and then have them hold a memorial service for her. They probably wouldn't even know what to do with her. A distant relative they hadn't heard a peep out of in nearly 30 years. But things being what they were, he couldn't just abandon her. If he hadn't known who she was, he could have had her buried as a Jane Doe. But he knew, and so all he could do was hand her over to the people in Sashikiji. The statute of limitations was long past, and it would be nothing but trouble to bring up a murder now. So he decided to say she'd probably been a suicide. Ugh, that sucks. Hate that for her. He wanted to hand her off and then return immediately to Tokyo, but the boat didn't depart that often. Leaving now, he ended up having to spend the night in Oshima. Since he'd have to leave the rental car in Atami, flying back to Tokyo would just make things more complicated. You can deliver her bones all by yourself. You don't need me for that. As he said this, getting out of the car in front of Atami Station, Ryuji seemed to be laughing at Asakawa. Sadako's bones were no longer in the plastic bag. They were wrapped neatly in a black cloth in the backseat of the car. To be sure, it was such a small bundle that even a child could have delivered it to the Yamamoto house in Sashikiji. The point was to get them to accept her. If he refused, then Asakawa wouldn't have anywhere to take her. That would be troublesome. Oh. I would hate that for her. She don't deserve that. She don't deserve that. He had a feeling that the charm would only be completely fulfilled when someone close to her held services for her. But still, why should they believe him when he showed up at their doorstep with a bag of bones saying this is your relative whom you haven't heard from in 25 years? You know what? That is a valid concern. What proof did he have? Asakawa was still a little worried. Well, happy trails. See you in Tokyo. Ryuji waved and went through the ticket gate. If I didn't have so much work, I wouldn't mind tagging along, but you know how it is. Ryuji had a mountain of work, scholarly articles and the like, that needed immediate attention. Let me thank you again. Forget about it. It was fun for me too. Asakawa watched until Ryuji disappeared into the shadow of the stairs leading to the platform. Just before disappearing from view, Ryuji stumbled on the steps. Although he quickly regained his balance, for a brief moment as he swayed, Ryuji's muscular form seemed to go double in Asakawa's vision. Asakawa realized he was tired and rubbed his eyes. When he took his hands away, Ryuji had disappeared up the stairs. A curious sensation pierced his breast, and somehow he detected the faint scent of citrus. Oh. Hello? That afternoon, he delivered Sadako's remains to Takashi Yamamura without incident. He had just returned from a fishing voyage, and as soon as he saw the black wrapped bundle, he seemed to know what it was. Asakawa held it out in both hands and said, "These were Sadako's remains." Takashi gazed at the bundle for a while, then narrowed his eyes tenderly. He shuffled over to Asakawa, bowed deeply, and accepted the bones, saying, "Thank you for coming all this way." Asakawa was a bit taken aback. He didn't think the old man would accept it that easily. Takashi seemed to guess what he was thinking, and he said in a voice full of conviction, "It's definitely Sadako." I mean, well, that's the guy who loved her mom. So Sadako would have been his if the whole thing with her mom did not happen. So, just gonna accept that. Up until age 3, and then from age 9 to age 18, Sadako had lived here at the Yamamura estate. Takashi was 61 now. What exactly did she mean to him? Guessing from expressions he received her remains, Asakawa imagined that he must have loved her dearly. Or wait, no, that's her cousin. I think that's her cousin. It's someone she's related to. I'm pretty sure it's her cousin. My bad. He didn't even ask for assurance that this was Sadako. Perhaps he didn't need to. Perhaps he knew intuitively that it was her inside the black cloth. The way his eyes had flashed when he'd first seen the bundle attested to that. There must have been some sort of power at work here too. Having completed his errand, Asakawa wanted to get away from Sadako as quickly as possible. So he beat a hasty retreat, lying that "I'll miss my flight if I don't leave now." If the family changed their minds and suddenly decided they wouldn't accept the remains as Sadako's without proof, all would be lost. I mean, who the fuck? Okay. You would really have to go out of your way to find a family who had lost somebody 20 plus years ago, and then find some remains, and then to be like, "Hey, this is your relative that died." That would have to be some serious dedication and that would just be fucked up to go all that way, to be that petty. So, honestly, you would have to be like really, it's honestly, this reminds me of like that one, this guy's grave was blown up by somebody who hated him. That's to have so much hate. And this guy was dead for like a couple of years by now. Oh my god. So that's what this reminded me of. Okay. Okay. If they started asking him for details, he didn't know what he'd say. It would be a long time before he'd be able to tell anyone the whole story. He particularly didn't feel up to telling her relatives. Asakawa stopped by Hayatsu's bureau to say thanks for all his help the other day, and then headed for the Oshima Hot Springs Hotel. He wanted to soak away all his fatigue in a hot bath and then write up the whole sequence of events. Just about the time Asakawa was settling into bed at the Oshima Hot Springs Hotel, Ryuji was dozing at his desk in his apartment. His lips rested on a half-written essay, his spittle smudging the dark blue ink. He was so tired that his hand still clutched his beloved Mont Blanc fountain pen. He hadn't switched over to a word processor yet. Suddenly, his shoulders jerked and his face contorted unnaturally. Ryuji leapt up. His back went ramrod straight and his eyes opened far wider than they usually did when he woke up. His eyes were normally slightly slanted, and when they were wide open like this, he looked different, somehow cuter than usual. His eyes were bloodshot. He'd been dreaming. Ryuji, normally not afraid of anything, was shaking through and through. He couldn't remember the dream, but the tautness of his body and his trembling bore witness to the terror of the dream. He couldn't breathe. He looked at the clock. 9:40. He couldn't immediately figure out the significance of the time. The lights were on, the overhead fluorescent bulb and the desk lamp in front of him, and there was plenty of light, but things still felt too dark. He felt an instinctual fear of the dark. His dream had been ruled by darkness like no other. Ryuji swiveled in his chair and looked at the video deck. The fateful tape was still in it. For some reason, he couldn't look away again. He kept staring at it. His breathing became rough. Misgiving showed on his face. Images raced through his mind, leaving no room for logical thought. Shit, you've come. Oh, hello? He placed both hands on the edge of the desk and tried to figure out what was behind him. His apartment was in a quiet place just off a main street. And all sorts of indistinct sounds came in from the street. Occasionally, the revving of an engine or the squeal of tires would stand out. But other than the sound of outside were just a dull, solid mass, stretching out behind him to the left and right. Pricking up his ears, he could figure out what was making some of the noises. Among them were the voices of insects. This mixed-up herd of sounds now started to float and flutter like a ghost. Reality seemed to recede. That was Ryuji's impression. And was reality receding, it left an empty space around him, in which was some sort of spirit matter hovered. The chilly night air and the moisture clinging to his skin turned into shadows and closed in on him. The beating of his heart grew faster, outstripping the ticking of the clock. The signs were pressing down on his chest. Ryuji looked again at the clock. 9:44. Every time he looked, he gulped. A week ago, when I watched that video at Asakawa's, what time was that? He said his brat always goes to sleep at around 9. Assuming we hit play after that, we would have finished at... He couldn't figure out exactly when they'd finished watching the video. But he could tell that the time was fast approaching. He was well aware that these indications that were now closing in on him were no counterfeit. This was different from when one's imagination magnified one's fears. This was no imaginary pregnancy. It was definitely coming steadily closer. What he didn't know was, why is it only coming for me? Why is it coming for me when it didn't come for Asakawa? It's not fair. His mind overflowed with confusion. What the hell's going on? Didn't we figure out the charm? So why? Why? His chest was beating in alarm. It felt like something had reached inside his breast and was squeezing his heart. Pain shot through his spine. He felt a cool touch on his neck and, startled, he tried to get up from his chair. But instead, he was overcome by severe pain in his waist and back. He collapsed on the floor. Think! What should you do now? Somehow, his remaining consciousness managed to give orders to his body. Stand. Stand and think. Ryuji crawled over the floor mat to the video deck. He pushed eject and took out the tape. Why am I doing this? There was nothing else he could do but take a good look at the tape that was behind everything. He looked at it back and front, and then went to put it back in the video deck but stopped. There was a title written on the label of the spine of the tape. Asakawa's handwriting. Liza Minnelli, Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., 1989. It must have had some music program recorded on it, before Asakawa had used it to dub that video. An electric jolt ran down his spine. A single thought swiftly took shape in his otherwise blank mind. Nonsense, he told himself, putting the thought from his mind, but when he turned the tape over, the momentary jolts changed to a certainty. Suddenly, Ryuji understood many things. The riddle of the charm, the old woman's prophecy, and another power hidden in the image of the tape. Why had those 4 kids in Villa Log Cabin run off without trying to carry out the charm? Why was Ryuji facing death when Asakawa's life had been spared? What had Sadako given birth to? The hint was right there, so close at hand. He hadn't realized that Sadako's powers had become fused with another power. She'd wanted to have a child, but her body couldn't bear one. So she'd made a bargain with the devil for lots of children. What effect is this going to have? Ryuji wondered. He laughed through his pain, an ironic laugh. You've got to be kidding. I wanted to watch the end of mankind, and here I am, in the vanguard. He crawled to the telephone and started to dial Asakawa's home number, but then remembered. He was in Oshima. Son of a bitch will be surprised when he hears I'm dead. I wish. The terrific pressure in his chest made his ribs creak. He dialed Maya Takano's number. Ryuji wasn't sure whether it was a fierce attachment to life or just a desire to hear her voice one last time, which had given rise to his impulse to summon Mai. He couldn't tell the difference anymore, but a voice came to him. Give it up. It wouldn't be right to get her messed up in this. But on the other hand, he still had a smidgen of hope. He might still be in time. The clock on the desk caught his eye, 9:48. He put the receiver to his ear and waited for Mai to come to the phone. His head suddenly felt unbearably itchy. He put his hand to his head and scratched furiously, and felt several strands of his hair come out. On the second ring, Ryuji lifted his face. There was a horizontal mirror on the chest of drawers in front of him, and he could see his face reflected in it. Forgetting that he had the phone wedged between his shoulder and his head, he brought his face in close to the mirror. The receiver fell, but he didn't care. He just stared at his face in the mirror. Somebody else was reflected in the mirror. The cheeks were yellowish, dried and cracked, and hair was falling out in clumps to reveal brown scabs. A hallucination. It's got to be a hallucination, he told himself. Even so, he couldn't control his emotions. A woman's voice came from the receiver where it lay on the floor. Hello? Hello? Ryuji couldn't stand it. He screamed. His screams overlapped with Mai's words, and at the end, he wasn't able to hear his beloved's voice. The face in the mirror was none other than his own, 100 years in the future. Even Ryuji hadn't known it would be so terrifying to meet himself transformed into someone else. Shocking. Shocking. Mai Takano picked up the phone on the 4th ring and said, "Hello?" The only answer was a ghastly scream. A shudder came over the line. Fear itself came from the line from Ryuji's apartment to Mai's. Surprised, Mai held the receiver away from her ear. The moans continued. The first scream had been one of shock, and the subsequent moans held incredulity. Credulity. How the fuck you say that word? She'd received harassing phone calls several times before, but she immediately realized that this was different and brought the phone back to her ear. The voice ceased. It was followed by dead silence. 9:49 p.m. His wish was to hear the voice of the woman he loved one last time that had been cruelly shattered. Instead, all he'd done was drown her in his death cries. Now he breathed his last. Nothingness enveloped his consciousness. Mai's voice came again from the receiver near his hand. His legs were splayed out on the floor, his back up against the bed. His left arm was thrown back across the mattress. His right hand was stretched out toward the receiver, which still whispered, "Hello?" And his head was bent backwards, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Just before he slipped into the void, Ryuji realized he wouldn't be saved, and he remembered to wish with all his might that he could teach that asshole Asakawa the secret of the videotape. Mai called, "Hello? Hello?" over and over again. No reply. She put the receiver back in the cradle. Those groans had sounded familiar. A premonition crept into her breast, and she picked up the receiver again to dial her esteemed professor's number. She got a busy signal. She pressed down the hook of her finger and dialed again. Still busy. And she knew that it had been Ryuji calling and that something horrible had happened to him. October 20th, Saturday. He was happy to come home again at last, but with his wife and child gone, the place seemed lonely. How long had it been since he was home? He tried to count on his fingers. He spent one night in Kamakura, gotten stuck on Oshima for 2 nights, spent the following night in Villa Log Cabin, and then another night on Oshima. He'd been away for 5 nights. But it felt as if he'd been gone from home for much longer. He'd often went away for 4 or 5 nights to research articles, but when he came home, it always felt like the time had flown by. Hello, Zethira. Welcome. Welcome in. Calamity, shut yourself. Hello, hello. Actually, funny enough, I'm almost done with the book. I'm like a few more pages in, and then I'm starting the sequel right after this. So, you'll be here for the beginning of the second book. If you stay.
Hello there.
Thank you for the follow. Alright. Alright. Yeah, I don't have much long. Well, today's reading, the book that I've been reading for the past couple of weeks, Ring. It's near the end. They found Miss Sadako's remains, and they are got returned to her family. And now, Ryuji, the one guy I wish died. What are you talking about? So, currently, apparently, Ryuji, the other guy that the main character Asakawa was with, apparently he's gonna die. Apparently he found out the secret to the tapes, what the charm was. And Miss Sadako is appearing before him. So, we'll see. Asakawa sat down at the desk in his study and turned on his word processor. His body still ached here and there, and his back hurt when he stood up or sat down. Even the 10 hours he'd slept last night couldn't make up for all the sleepless nights of the last week. But he couldn't stop and rest now. If he didn't take care of the work that had piled up, he wouldn't be able to keep his promise to take them on a drive to Nikko tomorrow, Sunday. He sat right down in front of the word processor. He had already saved the first half of the report on a floppy disk. Now he needed to add the rest. Everything that had happened since Monday, when they had learned the name of Sadako Yamamura. He wanted to finish this document as quickly as possible. By dinner time, he had written 5 pages. I should ban you from talking. I should just ban you from talking. Oh, so he does. Oh, so they know he really does this. Apparently, Calamity has a thing for me possibly being bald one day. I don't know if he says that in your stream, Zephyra, but apparently he really wants to see me bald. Never gonna happen, but you know. What the hell? Yeah, I think he'd... Not the toggle. Wealthier doubled my money even. I bet. What, bald? Not for me. I got 2 pennies. 2 pennies, not 2 nickels? Okay. A single nickel. It was a pretty good pace. The pace of Asakawa's writing usually picked up as the night wore on. At this rate, he'd be able to relax and enjoy seeing his wife and daughter tomorrow. Then on Monday, he'd go back to his normal life. He couldn't predict how his editor would react to what he was writing now. But he'd never know until he'd finished writing it. Knowing it was probably fruitless effort, Asakawa went through and put the events of the second half of the week in order. Only when the manuscript was finished would he feel that the episode was really and truly over. Sometimes his fingers stopped over the keyboard. The printout containing Sadako's photo was sitting by the desk. He felt as if that terrifyingly beautiful girl was watching him, and it ruined his concentration. He'd seen the same things she'd seen through those beautiful eyes. He still had a feeling that part of her had entered into his body. Asakawa put the photo out of sight. He couldn't work with Sadako staring at him. He ate dinner at a local diner, and then he suddenly wondered what Ryuji was doing now. He wasn't really worried. Somehow he just remembered Ryuji's face. And as he went back to his room and continued working, the face floated at the edge of his consciousness, gradually becoming clearer. I wonder what he's up to right now. His mental image of Ryuji's face drifted in and out of focus. He felt strangely agitated and reached out for the phone. After 7 rings, he heard the receiver being picked up and he felt relieved. But it was a woman's voice he heard. Hello? The voice was faint and thin. Asakawa had heard it before. Hello, this is Asakawa. Yes? Came the faint reply. You must be Mai Takano, right? I should thank you for the lunch you made the other day. Last time we met. Don't mention it, she whispered and waited. Is Ryuji there? Asakawa wondered why she didn't turn the phone over to Ryuji right away. Is Ryuji? The professor is dead. What? How long was he speechless? All he could say stupidly was, what? His eyes stared blankly at the point on the ceiling. Finally, when the phone felt ready to slip out of his hands, he managed to ask, when? Last night, around 10 o'clock. Oh! Ryuji had finished watching the video at Asakawa's condominium last Friday night at 10:49. He died right on schedule. What was the cause of death? He didn't need to ask. Sudden heart failure, but they haven't determined an exact cause of death. Asakawa barely managed to stay on his feet. This wasn't over. They just entered the second round. Mai, are you going to be there for a while? Yes, I need to put the professor's papers in order. I'll be over right away. Wait for me. Shit! So he did die. Oops. Asakawa hung up the phone and sank to the floor. His wife and daughter's deadline was tomorrow evening at 11. Another race against time, and this time, he was alone in the fight. Ryuji was gone. He couldn't stay on the floor like this. He had to take action, quickly, right now. He stepped out onto the street and gauged the traffic situation. It looked like driving would be faster than taking the train. He crossed at the crosswalk and climbed to the rental car, parked at the curb. He was glad he'd extended the rental another day so he could pick up his family. What did this mean? Hands gripped the wheel. He tried to get his thoughts together. Scene after scene flashed back to him, but none of them made any sense. The more he thought, the less his mind could absorb, and the thread connecting events got more and more tangled until it seemed ready to snap. Calm down and think. He lectured himself. Finally, he realized what he had to focus on. First of all, we didn't really figure out the charm, the way to escape death. Sadako didn't want her bones to be found and laid to rest with an appropriate memorial service. She wanted something entirely different. What? What is it? And why am I still alive like this if we didn't figure out the charm? What does this mean? Tell me what? Why did I only survive? Oh, he's going through it right now. At 11 o'clock next morning, Shizu and Yoko would face their deadline. It was already 9 in the night. If he didn't do something, he'd lose them. He'd been thinking of this from the perspective of a curse pronounced by Sadako, a woman who had met unexpected death, but he began to doubt this approach now. He had a premonition of a bottomless evil sneering at human suffering. Mai was kneeling formally in the Japanese-style room with an unpublished manuscript of Ryuji's on her lap. She was turning the pages, casting her eyes over each one, but it was a difficult subject at the best of times, and now nothing was sinking in. The room felt cavernous. Ryuji's parents had picked up his body early this morning and taken it back to Kawasaki. He was gone. Tell me everything about last night. His friend was dead. Ryuji was like a brother in arms to him. He grieved, but he hadn't time now to wallow in sentiment. Asakawa sat next to Mai and bowed. It was after 9:30 at night. I got a call from the professor. She told him the details. The scream that had come from the phone, the silence that had followed. Then, when she'd rushed to Ryuji's apartment, she'd found him leaning against the bed, legs spread wide. She fixed her gaze on the spot where Ryuji's corpse had been, and as she described the scene, tears came to her eyes. I called and called, but the professor didn't respond. Oh, she loved him too. The trash man, though. Asakawa didn't give her time to cry. Was there anything different about the room? No, she said, shaking her head. Only the telephone was off the hook and making an ear-splitting sound. At the moment of death, Ryuji had called Mai. Why? Asakawa pressed further. He didn't tell you anything there at the end, no? No last words? Nothing say about a videotape? A videotape? Mai's expression showed that she couldn't see any possible connection between her professor's death and a videotape. There was no way for Asakawa to know whether or not Ryuji had figured out the true nature of the charm just before he died. But why did he call Mai? He must have done it knowing his death was at hand. Was it just that he wanted to hear a loved one's voice? Isn't it possible that he figured out the charm and needed her help in carrying it out, and that's why he called her? In which case, it takes another person to make the charm work. A child. Asakawa started to leave. Mai walked him to the door. Mai, will you be staying here tonight? Yes, I need to take care of his manuscript. Well, I'm sorry to have bothered you when you're so busy. He went to leave. Yes? Mr. Asakawa, I'm afraid you have the wrong idea about the professor and me. What do you mean? You think we were having a relationship. As a man and a woman. No, well, I mean, I could spot a man who thought they were lovers, the way he looked at them. Asakawa looked at them that way. It bothered Mai. The first time I met you, the professor introduced you as his best friend. That surprised me. I never heard the professor talk like that about anyone before. I think you were very special to him. So. She hesitated before continuing. So I wish you could understand him a little better, as his best friend. The professor, as far as I know, he never knew a woman. She lowered her eyes. You mean he died? No, I'm not. I think Ryuji played for the other team and he was having trouble with himself. Which is sad, but you know, it happens. She lowered her eyes. You mean he died a virgin? Asakawa had nothing to say to that. He remained quiet. The Ryuji that Mai remembered sounded like a completely different person from the one he knew. Were they talking about the same man? But you didn't know what he did as a junior in high school. Was what he wanted to say, but he stopped himself. He had no desire to judge up a dead man's crimes, and he didn't feel like destroying Mai's cherished image of Ryuji. Not only that, he found himself with new doubts. Asakawa believed in a woman's intuition. Mai seemed to have been pretty close to Ryuji. And if she had said he was a virgin, he had to consider that incredible theory. In other words, maybe the whole thing about raping a college girl in his neighborhood had been nothing more than fiction. Who the fuck knows at this point? He's dead. And I don't know. Who the fuck knows? Ryuji. Well, no. Ryuji said he did it 3 times. Who the hell keeps that up? I mean, people have done worse. So honestly, it's not entirely out of yeah, it's not entirely crazy. So, anyways, moving on. The professor was like a child when he was with me. He told me everything. He didn't hide anything. I know almost everything there is to know about his youth, his pain. Is that so? Was all Asakawa could say in response. When he was with me, he was innocent as a 10-year-old boy. When there was a third person, when there was a third person around, he was a gentleman. And with you, I imagine he probably played the scoundrel. Am I right? If he hadn't. Mai softly reached out for her white handbag, took out a handkerchief, and dabbed her eyes. If he hadn't put on an act like that, he would never have been able to get along with the world. Do you see what I'm saying? Can you understand that? Asakawa was shocked, more than anything, but then something struck him. For a guy who had been good at his studies and excelled at sports, usually had been quite the loner. He hadn't had one close friend. He was so pure, not superficial, like those jerks I'd go to school with. They couldn't compare to him. Mai's handkerchief was soaked with tears by now. Standing in the doorway, Asakawa found that he had too much to think about to be able to come up with any suitable words to leave with Mai. Oh, poor girl. The image of the Ryuji he'd known diverged completely from the one Mai had. His view of the man had become so unfocused now as to be unrecognizable. There was a darkness concealed within Ryuji. No matter how he struggled, Asakawa couldn't completely grasp his personality. Had he really raped that girl in high school? Asakawa had no way of knowing that, nor whether he'd continued doing things like that, as he said he'd had. And right now, with his family's deadline coming up tomorrow, Asakawa really didn't want to worry himself with anything else. So all he said was, Ryuji was my best friend too. The words must have pleased Mai. Her adorable face broke into an expression that could have been a smile or could have been more weeping, and she bowed ever so slightly. Asakawa shut the door and hurried down the stairs. As he emerged onto the street and put distance between himself and Ryuji's apartment, he was suddenly overwhelmed by the thought of this friend who'd thrown everything into this dangerous game, even sacrificing his life. Asakawa didn't bother to wipe away his tears. Also, alright. I will be right back.
Hello there.
Where did all you people come from? Like, legit, where did everybody come from? You know, fair, valid. Also, I have been reading Ring. I'm almost done, actually, and then I'm going to go into Spiral right after this. I'm probably gonna, well, I have all 3 books, so I'm probably gonna just go with all, gonna just finish the whole series. I'm actually just a few more pages left, actually, then I'm gonna start Spirals. So, everybody will be here just as I start Spirals. Y'all ready? And so Asakawa's friend Ryuji just died. Asakawa was supposed to die, but he didn't. And now he's wondering, Ryuji figured out the charm, but he died before he could tell Asakawa. And I guess Asakawa was kind of on the verge of figuring it out. Because now, since Ryuji died, his wife and his baby, Asakawa's wife and his baby, are next on the chopping block to die. If he doesn't figure out what the fuck the charm is. October 21st, Sunday. Midnight passed and Sunday finally arrived. Asakawa was making notes on sheets of paper, trying to get his thoughts in order. Just before his death, Ryuji had figured out the charm. He telephoned Mai, possibly to summon her. Which means that he needed Mai's help to work the charm. Okay, the important question here is, why am I still alive? There's only one possible answer. At some point during the week, without even knowing it, I must have carried out the charm. What other explanation is there? The charm must be something anybody can easily do, with the help of another person. But that brought up another problem. Why did those 4 kids run out without performing the charm? If it was so easy, why couldn't at least one of them have played tough when they were together and then gone and done it in secret later? Think. What did I do this week? What did I do that Ryuji clearly didn't do? Asakawa let out a yell. How the hell am I supposed to know? There must have been 1,000 things I did this week that he didn't do. This isn't funny. Kinda is a bit funny. At least to me. He punched Sadako's photo. Damn you! How long are you going to keep torturing me? He hit her face over and over, but Sadako's expression never changed. Her beauty never been diminished. He went into the kitchen and splashed some whiskey into a glass. All the blood had rushed to a single point in his head and he needed to disperse it. He went to knock it back in one gulp, but then stopped. He just might come up with the answer tonight and had to drive to Ashikaga in the middle of the night. So maybe he'd better not drink. He was mad at the way he'd always tried to rely on something outside himself. When he had to dig Sadako's bones out from under the cabin, he had to give in to fear and nearly lost himself. It was only because he had Ryuji with him that he'd been able to do what he needed to do. Ryuji! Hey Ryuji, I'm begging you, help me out here. He knew he'd never be able to go out without his wife and daughter. Never. To go on without his wife and daughter. My bad. Ryuji, lend me your strength. Why am I still alive? Is it because I was the one to find Sadako's remains first? If so, then there's no saving my family. That can't be right. Can it, Ryuji? He was devastated. He knew it was no time to be wailing, but he'd lost his cool. After moaning to Ryuji for a while, his calm returned. He started making notes again on the paper. The old woman's prophecy. Did Sadako really have a baby? Just before her death, she had sex with the last smallpox victim in Japan. Does that relate somehow? All of his notes ended with question marks. Nothing was certain. Was this going to lead him to the charm? He couldn't afford to fail. Several more hours elapsed. It was beginning to get light out. Lying on the floor, Asakawa could hear the sound of a man's breathing. Birds chirped. He didn't know if he was awake or dreaming. Somehow he'd wound up on the floor, asleep. He squinted against the bright morning light. The figure of a man was slowly fading in the soft light. He wasn't scared. Asakawa came to himself with a start and stared hard in the direction of the figure. Ryuji, is that you? The figure didn't reply, but suddenly the title of a book came to Asakawa, and so vividly that it might have been branded into the wrinkles of his brain. Epidemics and Man. The title appeared in white on the back of his eyelids when he closed his eyes, then disappeared, but it still echoed in his head. That book should be in Asakawa's study. When he'd first started to investigate the case, Asakawa had wondered if it could have been a virus that had caused 4 people to die simultaneously. He'd bought the book then. He hadn't read it, but he remembered putting it away on a bookshelf. Sun was streaming in through the eastern windows, falling on him. He tried to stand up. His head throbbed. Was it a dream? He opened the door to his study. He took down the book that whoever it was had suggested to him. Epidemics and Man. Of course, Asakawa had a pretty good idea who it was that had made the suggestion. Ryuji. He returned just for a brief moment to teach him the secret of the charm. Getting help from the next life is wild, but not uncommon. Oddly enough. So where in this 300-page tome did the answer lie? Asakawa had another flash of intuition. Page 191. The number was insinuated into his brain, though not quite as seemingly as the last time. He opened to that page. A single word jumped out at him and pulsed bigger and bigger. Reproduction. 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 A virus's instinct is to reproduce. A virus usurps living structures in order to reproduce itself. Oh! Asakawa groaned. He'd finally grasped the nature of the charm. It's obvious what I did this week and Ryuji didn't. I brought the tape home, made a copy, and showed it to Ryuji. The charm is simple. Anybody can do it. Make a copy and show it to somebody. Help it reproduce by showing it to somebody who hasn't seen it. Those 4 kids were happy with their prank and stupidly left the tape in the cabin. Nobody went to the effort of going all the way back for it so they could actually perform the charm. No matter how he thought about it, that was the only possible interpretation. He picked up the phone and dialed Ashikaga. Shizu answered. Listen to me. Listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you. There's something I need your mother and father to see. Not him fucking sacrificing the parents? They gotta go. They gotta take one for the team. Right away. I'm on my way home, on my way now, so don't let them go anywhere before I get there. Do you understand? This is incredibly important. Am I selling my soul to the devil? In order to save my wife and daughter, I'm willing to put my wife's parents in danger, even if it's only temporary. But if it'll save their daughter and granddaughter, I'm sure they'd gladly cooperate. All they have to do is make copies and show them to somebody else, and they'll be out of danger. But after that, what then? I mean, they'd fulfill it. What's this all about? I don't understand. Just do as I say. I'm leaving right now. Oh, right. They have a video deck, don't they? Yes. Beta or VHS? VHS. Great, I'm on my way. Don't. I repeat, don't go anywhere. Hold on a minute. What do you want to show my mom and dad? Is that video, isn't it? He didn't know what to say, so he shut up. Right? Right. It's not dangerous? Dangerous? You and your daughter are going to be dead in 5 hours. Give me a break, damn it. Stop asking so many questions. I don't have time to explain it all to you from the beginning anymore. Asakawa wanted to shout at her, but he managed to restrain himself. Just do as I say. I mean, fair enough. To be fair, he's just a man just trying to save his family. The parents gotta go. Parents gotta go. It was just before 7. If he raced there on the freeway, provided there were no traffic delays, he should get to his in-laws' house in Ashikaga by 9:30. Factoring in the time it would take to make a copy for his wife and another for his daughter, they should just make the 11 o'clock deadline. He hung up, opened the door to the entertainment center, and unplugged the video deck. They needed 2 decks to make copies, so he had to take one of his. As he left, he took one more look at the pic photo of Sadako. You sure gave birth to something nasty. Oh. Shit. He took the Oi ramp onto the freeway, deciding to skirt Tokyo Bay and get on the Tohoku Highway, headed out of town. There wouldn't be much traffic on the Tohoku Highway. The problem was how to avoid congestion before that. As he paid the toll on the Oi on-ramp and peered at the traffic information board, he realized for the first time that it was Sunday morning. As a result, there were hardly any cars in the tunnel under the bay, where they were usually lined up like beads on a rosary. There weren't even any jams in the big merging areas. At this rate, he'd get to Ashikaga right on schedule, with plenty of time to start making copies of the video. Asakawa eased up on the accelerator. Now he was more afraid of going too fast and getting into an accident. He sped north along the Sumida River. Glancing down, he could see neighborhoods just waking up on a Sunday morning. People were walking around with a different air than on weekday mornings, a peaceful Sunday morning. He couldn't help but wonder, what effect is this going to have? With my wife's copy and my daughter's copy, this virus is going to be set free in 2 directions. How is it going to spread from there? He could imagine people making copies and passing them on to people who had already seen it before, trying to keep the thing contained within a limited circle so it wouldn't spread. But that would be going against the virus's will to reproduce. There was no way of knowing yet how the function was incorporated into the video. That would take some experimenting, and it would probably be impossible to find anybody willing to risk their life to find the truth of it until it had spread pretty far and things had become quite serious. Sadako? Girl? Damn! Just damn. Just taking everybody out. Respect. It really wasn't very difficult to make a copy and show it to someone. So that's what people would do. As the secret traveled by word of mouth, it would be added to. You have to show it to someone who hasn't seen it before. And as the tape propagated to the week's lag time would probably be shortened. People who were shown the tape wouldn't wait a week to make a copy and show it to someone else. How far would this ring expand? People would be driven by an instinctual fear of disease, and this pestilential videotape would no doubt spread throughout society in the blink of an eye. And, driven by fear, people would start to spread crazy rumors, such as, once you've seen it, you have to make at least 2 copies and show them to at least 2 different people. It turned into a pyramid scheme, spreading incomparably faster than it would just one tape at a time. In the space of half a year, everybody in Japan would have become a carrier, and the infection would spread overseas. In the process, of course, several people would die, and people would realize that the tape's warning wasn't a lie. They'd start making copies even more desperately. There would be panic. Where would it end? How many victims would this claim? 2 years ago, during the boom in interest in the occult, the newsroom had received 10 million submissions. Something had gone haywire, and it would happen again, allowing the new virus to run rampant. A woman's resentment toward the masses who had hounded her father and mother to their deaths in the smallpox virus's resentment toward the human ingenuity that had driven it to the brink of extinction had fused together in the body of a singular person named Sadako Yamamura, and had reappeared in the world in an unexpected, unimagined form. Whew! Asakawa, his family, everybody who had seen the video had been subconsciously infected with the virus. They were carriers, and viruses burrowed directly into the genes, the core of life. There was no telling yet what would result from this, how it would change humanity, change human history, human evolution. In order to protect my family, I am about to let loose on the world a plague which could destroy all mankind. Asakawa was frightened by the essence of what he was trying to do. A voice was whispering to him. If I let my wife and daughter die, it'll end right here. If a virus loses its host, it'll die. I can save mankind. But the voice was too quiet. He entered the Tohoku Highway. No congestion. If he kept going, he'd be there in plenty of time. Asakawa drove with his arms taut and both hands clutching the wheel. I won't regret it. My family has no obligation to sacrifice themselves. There are some things you have to protect when they're threatened. He spoke loud enough to be heard over the engine, to renew his determination. If he were Ryuji, what would he do? He felt sure he knew. Ryuji's spirit had taught him the secret of the video. It was practically telling him to save his family. This gave him courage. He knew that what Ryuji would probably say. Be true to what you're feeling this instant. All we have in front of us is an uncertain future. That future will take care of itself. When humanity gets around to applying its ingenuity, who knows if it won't find a solution. It's just another trial for the human species. In every age, the devil reappears in a different guise. You can stamp it out, and he'll keep coming back over and over. Asakawa kept his foot steady on the accelerator, and the car pointed toward Ashikaga. In his rearview mirror, he could see the skies over Tokyo, receding into the distance. Black clouds moved eerily across the skies. They slithered like serpents, hinting at the unleashing of an apocalyptic evil. And that is the end of Ring. Oh, shit. And I have Spiral right here in front of me. Okay, I'm gonna have a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna be right back, and we will start Spirals. Spiral, not spirals, Spiral. Okay. I am back. And now to start Spiral. Let's do it! Okay, so Spiral is the next book in the Ring series. So it's kind of the same layout as it's a bit of the same layout as Ring. All right. So it's a completely different book, so. Prologue. Mitsuo Ando awoke from a dream in which he was sinking into the sea. The trilling of the telephone insinuated itself into the sound of the surf, and the next minute he was jerked into wakefulness, as though the waves had taken him. He stretched his arms out over the side of the bed and picked up the receiver. Hello? He waited, but no sound came through the line. Hello? He said again, sternly this time, urging the caller to reply. Then it came a woman's voice, so morose it made him shudder. Did you get it? The voice filled Ando with fatigue. He felt as if he were being dragged into a dark ditch. The dream from which he'd been just awakened flashed before his eyes. A huge wave had suddenly sucked him up off the beach. As he sank to the bottom of the sea, he lost all sense of up or down, right or left, until he was helpless against the current. As always, he'd felt a tiny hand grasping at his shin. Every time he had the dream, he felt on his feet the touch of that little hand. Those anemone-like fingers slipping away to vanish into the depths of the ocean. There was absolutely nothing he could do to prevent it, and it tortured him. He stretched out his arms, sure that he should be able to reach the body, but he just couldn't get a grip on it. It eluded his grasp every time, leaving behind only a soft, fine strands of hair. The woman's voice reminded him of an unpleasant vividness of the soft feel of that hair. Yes, it arrived, Ando answered, annoyed. The form of their divorce. It had arrived 2 or 3 days ago, with his wife's signature and seal already affixed. All Ando had to do was sign it and stamp his own seal on it, and the paper would have fulfilled the purpose of its existence. But he hadn't done it yet. And? There was a weariness in his wife's voice as she prodded him. How could she be so blase about putting an end to 7 years of married life? And what? I want you to sign it, stamp it, and return it to me. Ando shook his head. How many times had he tried to make it clear to her? He wanted to start over, but every time he told her so, she would set terms he couldn't meet, as if to prove to him the strength of her determination. Well, buddy. He'd been perfectly willing to give up all self-respect and grovel, but lately he'd been getting a bit tired of even that. All right, I'll do what you want. Ando surprised himself giving in so easily. His wife was silent for a moment and then rasped. I think you owe me an explanation. About what? It was a stupid response. About what you did to me. Still clutching the receiver, Ando squeezed his eyes shut. Is she going to... harangue me every morning, even after she gets her divorce. It was a crushing thought. It was my fault, but he said it too easily without putting feeling into the words, and that set her off. You never cared for him. You're talking nonsense. Listen to yourself. Well, then why? Don't ask. You already know the answer. How could you do such a thing? Oh, I guess he let their kid die. Oof. Her voice trembled, a harbinger of the frenzy she was warming up to. He wanted to tell her to never call again and then slam down the receiver, but he restrained himself. This was the least he could do. The only reparation he could offer was to silently bear his wife's recriminations, to allow her to vent her grief. Say something. She was in tears now. Like what? For a year and 3 months now, we've talked about nothing else. There's nothing left to say. Give him back to me. It was a cry of pain totally devoid of reason. He didn't need to ask whom she wanted back. Ando wanted him back too. It was what he'd been praying for every day, knowing full well how useless it was. Bring him back, I beg you. Give him back. I can't, he said, simply trying to calm her down. I want him back. He couldn't bear to hear his wife like this, wrapped up in a past misery, unwilling to start a new life. Ando was trying, at least, to live a little more constructively. There was no recovering what was lost, and he'd done his utmost to repair their marriage, to convince her to think about the new life they'd have, if they could. Oh, that's so sad. He didn't want to get divorced over this. He was prepared to do anything. It would be worth it, if only they could again be the happy couple they'd once been. But his wife didn't want to look to the future, and she blamed him for everything. Give him back! What more do you want me to do? You don't know what you've done. I'm pretty sure he knows. Pretty sure. Ando sighed, loudly enough to be heard on the other end of the line. She was repeating the same barren phrases. Her nerves were clearly fraying. He wanted to introduce her to a psychiatrist friend of his, but his wife's father was a doctor, the head of the hospital. She'd just take it as meddling. I'm hanging up now. That's it. Run away like you always do. I want you to forget this, to get over it. He knew it was useless, but he couldn't think of anything else to say. Ando started to put down the receiver. As he did so, a cry of desperation came from the earpiece. I want you to bring Takanori back. Takanori. My bad. I'm sorry, kid. Even after he'd hung up, the name kept spilling from the receiver until it echoed filled the room. Without knowing it, Ando was now muttering to himself. Takanori. 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 Ando lay unmoving on the bed for a while, curling up in the fetal position, head in his hands. Then he glanced at the clock and knew he couldn't stay like that forever. It was time to leave for work. Poor guy. That actually really sucks. Though I could understand her. Well, not understand her, but like... That's just sad. She lost a child. Like anybody would be distraught after that. Ando unplugged the phone from the wall jack so she couldn't call back, then went to stand by the window. When he opened it to get rid of some of the gloom, he heard the cry of a crow. They always flew over from Yoyogi Park to perch on the power lines, but this one sounded closer than usual. It gave him a start. But the avian cry, airy and expansive, also lightened his mood. It was such a contrast to the black depths of the ocean of his dream, and to the desperate cries of his wife for their son. It was Saturday morning, a clear autumn day. Maybe it would be wonderful weather rubbing him the wrong way. But tears welled up in his eyes. He blew his nose. He was alone in his studio apartment. He collapsed back onto bed. He thought he'd managed to fight back the tears, but now they came streaming out of the corners of his eyes. Soon he was sobbing, hugging his pillow and calling his son's name. He hated himself for falling apart like that. Grief's visits weren't regular. It waited until something set it off, and then it kept on coming. He hadn't wept for his son for a couple of weeks. Although the hiatus between his crying spells were getting longer, when the sadness did come, it was just as deep as ever. How long was this going to continue? He could hardly bear to wonder. Grief is... Everybody grieves differently. That's what people need to understand. Ando took an envelope out from between two books on his shelf and withdrew it from its several tangled strands of hair. They were all that was left, physically, of his son. His hand had brushed the child's head, and when he tried to pull the boy toward him, these strands had come off. It was some kind of miracle that they'd stayed stuck to his hand, and all that while he'd been thrashing about in the ocean. They'd gotten twisted around his wedding ring. The body never surfaced. They had been unable to have a proper cremation. Oh my god. The lock of hair was Ando's only relic of his boy. Ando held the strand to his cheek and recalled the touch of his son's skin. When he closed his eyes, Takanori came back to life in his mind. Ando could almost believe the boy was right there. Oh, that's so sad. When he finished brushing his teeth, he just stood in front of the mirror, naked from the waist up. He put his hand to his jaw and rubbed it lightly. He felt the back of his teeth with his tongue. There was still a little plaque clinging to them. Gross. He saw a spot on his neck just below his chin that the razor had missed. He brought the straight razor to his neck and shaved off the little stumps of beard, and then froze, arrested by his own reflection. He raised his jaw and looked at the pale neck outstretched in the mirror. He shifted his grip on the razor and brought the back of it to the base of his throat, then slowly lowered it from his neck to his chest, and then slowly to his midriff, finally resting it near his navel. A white line ran along the surface of his flesh, between his nipples and his belly, imagining his razor as a scalpel. He pictured dissecting his own body. Ando spent his days cutting corpses open, so he knew perfectly well what he'd find inside his chest. His fist-sized heart sat cradled between his two pink lungs and was beating firmly. If he concentrated, he could almost hear it. But the persistent pain in his chest, where in his innards did sorrow lodge. Was it the heart? He wanted, with his bare hands, to scoop out the clump of remorse. The razor felt as if it were going to slip on his sweaty skin, so he put it down on the shelf over the sink. He turned his head to see a thin line of blood at the right of his throat. He'd nicked himself. He should have felt a little stab of pain where the edge of the blade bit into his skin. But as he stared at the blood, he felt nothing. He was lately growing numb to physical pain. Several times already, he'd only learned he'd been hurt after seeing the wound. Maybe he was losing his passion for life. Oh. He pressed a towel to his neck and picked up his watch. 8:30. He'd better leave for work. His job was his only salvation these days. Only by immersing himself in work could he elude to the clutch of his memories. Ando, a lecturer in forensic medicine at Fukuzawa University Medical School, was also a coroner for the Tokyo Medical Examiner's Office. Only when he was conducting an autopsy could he forget the death of his beloved son. Ironically, playing with dead bodies released him from the death that had touched him. He left his apartment. As he walked through the lobby of his building, he looked at his watch. A habit. He was 5 minutes behind schedule, the 5 minutes he'd taken to sign and stamp the writ of divorce. In a mere 5 minutes, the bond that had connected him to his wife had been severed. He was aware of 3 mailboxes between his apartment and the university. Ando made up his mind to drop the envelope into the first one along the way. He hurried off to the train station. It's so sad. Okay. Probably gonna get a little, like... see how far this is. Wait, part 3, what? Probably gonna get through like maybe like 2 chapters of the first part. Let's see, hold on, let me make sure. These are like really crisp pages, so. Yeah, I think we'll probably get through the first like 2 chapters of this one. Because they're like a bit lengthy. Alrighty. Okay. So part 1. Dissecting. Today was Ando's turn on autopsy duty. In the ME's office, he ran his gaze over the file of his next corpse. As he compared the Polaroids of the scene, his palms started to sweat, and he had to walk over to the sink several times to wash his hands. It was mid-October and it wasn't warm, but Ando had always been a heavy sweater. He was in the habit of washing his hands several times a day. He spread the photos out to the table once more. One in particular held his attention. In it, a stocky man sat with his head resting on the edge of the bed. The position had been in when he stopped breathing. There was no evident external wounds. The next photo was a close-up of his face. No evidence of blood congestion, no signs of strangulation. In none of the photos could Ando find anything to establish the cause of death, which was why, even though there was nothing to indicate a crime, the body had been sent to the ME's office for a post-mortem. It looked to be a sudden death, and a natural one at that. And under the circumstances, the body couldn't legally be cremated until the cause of death was discovered. The corpse was found with both arms and both legs spread wide. Ando knew the man, knew him well. An old friend from college, whom Ando had never dreamed of having to dissect. Ryuji Takayama, who had been alive up until a mere 12 hours ago, had been a classmate of Ando's through 6 years of medical school. Most graduates of their program were aspiring clinicians. And when Ando decided to go into forensic medicine, people called him an oddball behind his back. But Takayama had gone even further off the track. He led his class at med school. After graduation, he started over as an undergraduate in the Department of Philosophy. At the time of his death, he had been a lecturer in philosophy, specializing in logic. Lecturer was a position Ando held in his own department. In other words, even granting that the school had let Takayama re-enroll as a junior, his rise in the department had been meteoric. 32 at the time of his death, he'd been 2 years younger than Ando, who'd spent a couple of years after high school cramming to get into the university of his choice. Ando's eyes came to rest on the line where the time of death had been noted. 9:49 the previous evening. Oh. This time of death is awfully precise, Ando said, glancing up at the tall police lieutenant who had come to observe the autopsy. As far as Ando knew, Takayama had lived alone in his apartment in East Nakano. A bachelor, living alone, dying suddenly at home? It shouldn't have been possible to get such a precise fix on the time of death. I guess you could say we were lucky, the lieutenant said nonchalantly, seating himself in a nearby chair. Lucky? How? The lieutenant glanced at his companion, a young sergeant. Mai Takano's here, isn't she? Yes, sir. I saw her outside of the waiting room. You want to go get her? Hi, Centimeter. You're fine. Buddy, you're fine. You're fine, don't worry. Actually, I just finished Ring, and I'm starting the second book, Spiral. It's basically the book that inspired the horror movie Ring. So we just started, so. Yep, a spooky book for, well, no, I've been reading that for like a couple of weeks now, so. Of course, get cozy. Enjoy your stay. Okay. Yes, sir. She's not a relative, but she's the one who discovered the body. One of Professor Takayama's pet students. Thank you for the bit. She's the one who discovered the body, one of Professor Takayama's pet students. His lover, in fact. If you find anything suspicious about her report, feel free to ask her some questions yourself. Any question, Doc. It was policy to turn the body over to the next of kin directly following the autopsy. Honestly, I was thinking about switching over to have Miss Girl be like a bit redeem. I mean, titties for biddies. Get rich quick schemes. One of the many schemes that I've thought of. I mean, it could work. But it's a work in progress. Okay. Okay. Honestly, you think more people would come in if they saw Miss Girl? Who knows? Nah, she could. Nah, she could. She'll be alright. She could stay. She could stay over there. Honestly, hold on. Let's see. Probably for the last half hour. Hold on. We'll see. No, I think you kind of... Hello there. Well, I gotta figure out which one it is. Pretty sure it's probably just 7. Well, Hatsune Miku hair. There it is. We'll see. Last half hour, Miss Girl makes an appearance. Okay. It was policy to turn the body over to the next of kin directly following the autopsy. In Takayama's case, that would be his mother, or his brother and sister-in-law. They were out in the waiting room, where they'd been joined by Mai Takano. The woman in question stepped into the office, then stopped and shook her head. Upon noticing her, Ando immediately stood up, bowed, and offered her a chair. I apologize for putting you through this, he said. Mai, dressed in a plain navy dress, had a white handkerchief clutched in her hands. Ando wondered if proximity to death brought out a woman's beauty. Her body was slender, her arms and legs delicate, and the subdued simplicity of her dress emphasized the paleness of her skin. Her face was a perfect oval in shape, with smooth, balanced features. Ando could see the beautiful curves of her skull without dissecting her. Hey girl, you have a beautiful skull. No doubt, beneath her skin, her organs had a healthy hue and her skeletal frame was perfectly regular. He had a sudden urge to touch them. Buddy. See if I can get the hose in here. The lieutenant introduced them and they exchanged names. Mai went to sit down in the chair Ando had indicated, but she faltered. She had to steady herself on the desk. Are you all right? Ando peered at her, examining her complexion. She suddenly looked ashen under the surface wetness of her skin. He wondered if she was anemic. I'm quite fine, thank you. She stared at the point of the floor for a while, her handkerchief pressed to her forehead, until the lieutenant brought her a glass of water. She drank it, and it seemed to calm her somewhat. She raised her head and spoke in a voice so soft Ando could hardly make it out. So, it's just that Ando understood immediately. She was having her period, that plus the emotional stress was responsible for her anemic state. If that was all, it was nothing to worry about. Girl, I felt that. It so happens that the late Mr. Takayama and I were buddies back in college. He told her this partly to set her at ease. Mai raised her eyebrows, downcast until now. You said your name was Miss Dr. Ando? Yes. She gazed intently at him. Then, with evident pleasure, she narrowed her eyes and bowed slightly, as though she were meeting an old friend. Pleased to make your acquaintance. Ando thought he knew how to interpret her expression. She probably felt she could trust his friendship with Takayama to keep him from treating the body callously. But in truth, his friendship or lack of it with the deceased had no effect on how he wielded his scalpel. Excuse me, Mr. Kano? The lieutenant broke in. Would you mind telling the doctor exactly what you told us, how you discovered the body? Damn. He seemed determined not to let his guard down on this case just because there were no signs of foul play. There was no time to waste in exchanging fond memories of the dear departed. He had brought Mai here for the express purpose of having her present her story to Ando. She'd been the first person to see the body, and Ando was the medical examiner in charge of the autopsy. Hopefully, between them, they could establish the cause of death. Oh, so sad. Well, that was why they were gathering here today. Actually, In a hushed tone, Mine began to tell Ando more or less the same story she had told the police the night before. I had just gotten out of the bath and was blow-drying my hair when the phone rang. I looked at my watch immediately. I suppose it's a habit of mine. If I know what time it is when the phone rings, I can usually guess who it is. Professor Takayama rarely called me. Usually, I called him. I picked up the receiver and said hello, and a moment later I heard a scream from the other end of the line. At first, I thought it was a prank. I held the phone away from my ear, in surprise, but then the scream faded into a moan, and then it gave out altogether. I felt like I was wrapped in a stillness not of this world. I brought the receiver back to my ear and listened for signs of anything, all the while dreading what I might find out. And then, suddenly, like a switch flicking on, Professor Takayama's face was in my mind. I recognized the scream. It sounded like him. I hung up the phone and then dialed his number, but the line was busy. And so I concluded that that was he who had called and that something bad had happened to him. So you and Ryuji didn't have any sort of conversation? Ando asked. She shook her head. No, I just heard that scream. God, damn, imagine just hearing somebody's... That is honestly quite unnerving. Just hearing somebody's last, death scream. Damn. Ando scribbled something on a memo pad and urged her to continue. What happened next? I wonder what. I went to his apartment to see what had happened. It took me about an hour to get there by train, and when I went in, he was there, by the bed in the room past the kitchen. Yeah, different wig, obviously. The front door was unlocked? He'd given me a key, she said with a certain artless bashfulness. No, what I mean is, it was locked from the inside then? Yes, it was. So then you went in. Ando prompted her. Professor Takayama had his head on the bed, facing up, his arms and legs spread out. Her voice caught. She shook her head vigorously as if to repel the scene replaying itself before her eyes. Ando hardly needed her to elaborate. He had the photos before him. They spoke of Ryuji's lifeless body more eloquently than the words could. Ando used the picture as a fan to send a breeze over his sweaty brow. Was there anything different about the room? Nothing that I noticed, except the phone off the hook. I could hear the whining sound coming from it. Ando tried to collate the information he'd gleaned from the incident report and my story to reconstruct the situation. Ryuji had sensed something was wrong with him and had called his lover, Mai Takano. He must have hoped she could help him, but then why hadn't he called 911? You have a sudden pain in your chest. If you have the time and strength to use the phone, normally your first call would be for an ambulance. Who dialed 911? I did. From where? Professor Takayama's apartment. And he hadn't done so, correct? Ando shot a glance at the lieutenant, who nodded. He had already confirmed that there had been no request for an ambulance from the deceased. Ando briefly considered the possibility of a suicide. Distraught at his lover's cruel treatment of him, a man decided to take his own life and swallows poison. He decided to call the woman who had driven him to it to accuse and torment her. Instead, all he could manage is a dying scream. Ugh! But according to the report, suicide didn't seem to be a possibility. There were no signs on the scene of anything that might have contained poison, nor any proof that Mai had taken such an object away from the premises. Hey, it's the one only playlist I could find that didn't have rain, okay? All of these like spooky like all these like spooky like playlists all have rain. And no, I mean you're right. It does rain on Halloween a lot. No? Wait, I think you mentioned that last time. And I kind of forgot about it, no lie. Because I really like this music too. But I do want to play Little Nightmares as well, but you know, I don't have any money. Okay, yeah, okay. I did forget about it. I meant to do it after stream. Yeah, me too. I want to play. Well, I want to play it myself, but I do want to play the third one too.
Why is the rum always gone?
Thank you. Why is this over? Anomaly's prison break course. A prison break? Have a good night, Silence. Yeah. She doesn't come out often, though. That's the thing. She won't be coming out often. Oh, the prison. You're the prison guard. Oh, okay. Well, I got two things a bit for like about 20 minutes. Yeah. I guess she could finally take a rest. Hello. I'm back. Your one and only. Honestly, I think after this chapter, I'm probably going to end it. This is really getting up there. Okay. Besides, one look at the shape she was in dispelled any such suspicions. One had to be quite obtuse to the subtleties of relations between the sexes not to see at a glance how deeply Mai Takano had respected her professor. The moistness that welled up in her eyes now and then was not due to guilt about having driven her lover to take his own life. It came from profound sorrow at the thought of never being able to touch his body again. For Ando, it was like looking in a mirror. He confronted his own grief-stricken face every morning. That kind of devastation couldn't be faked. And there was the fact that she'd come down to the ME's office to claim the body after the autopsy. But most important of all, Ando couldn't imagine a guy as dauntless as Ryuji Takayama killing himself over something like a breakup, which left the heart or the head. Ando had to look for signs of sudden heart failure or cerebral hemorrhaging. Of course, he couldn't rule out the possibility that an examination of the stomach contents would turn up potassium cyanide, or signs of food poisoning, or carbon monoxide poisoning, or one of the other unexpected causes that he occasionally came across. But his suspicions had never been far off the mark before. Takayama had sensed something wrong with him all of a sudden, and he'd wanted to hear his girlfriend's voice one last time. But there hadn't been enough time to do more than scream before his heart stopped beating. That had to be it, more or less. The technician who was assisting Ando that day poked his head into the office and said, "Doctor, everything's ready." Ando stood and said, to no one in particular, "Well, time to get started." Avoid the void, got it. One way or another, he'd have the facts once he dissected the body. He'd never failed to establish the cause of death before. In no time, he'd figure out what had killed Takayama. The thought of that he might not didn't even cross his mind. Ugh. I mean, to be fair, yeah, you would have never expected, die from a fucking video. Like most would. Alrighty. I think I will end it here tonight. And I'm glad I finally got to start Spiral. So. Thank you, Centimeter. Alright. So. I think she is, if I'm right. Let's see. I think if I spell her fucking name right. Alright. So thank you for being with me tonight. Getting to Spiral. After Ring. And who knows whatever the fuck else Miss Sadako is gonna do to more people. So, good evening, good night, or whenever you're watching this. See you next time. Bye.